All right. Welcome, everyone. Today's session is Exit Ready, Why a Business Playbook Drives Higher Valuations. So welcome to today's webinar. I'm Jared from Trainual. I'll be your moderator. And joining me today are Tom from Trainual and Clinton from Benchmark International. And we're going to have a live Q&A after this discussion here. And we're here to talk about an under-realized and underreported truth that businesses with well-documented processes and training tend to sell faster for more money and with less perceived buyer risk than businesses that don't have any of that. So Clinton and Tom both see this reality in their day-to-day, and we'd love to hear their unique perspectives on it. And so just to set the stage in 60 seconds or so each, Clinton, starting with you, can you please tell us what Benchmark, or give us a quick intro about you and what Benchmark does and who it's for? And then Tom, give us a quick intro about you and the same for Trainual.
Sure. I've been at Benchmark International for 14 years. We're a sell-side mergers and acquisitions advisory firm. We represent businesses anywhere from $500,000 EBITDA upwards to 20, 25 million EBITDA. And they tend to be owner-operated businesses, which makes today's conversation of great interest to us. We do about 200, 220 deals per year across 3 continents, about half of our businesses in the United States. We are sector agnostic. We've sold everything: healthcare, manufacturing, distribution, construction businesses, trades, any industry, we can handle it.
Amazing. And then Tom, introduce yourself and give us the quick rundown on Trainual.
I don't know if I can top that, but I'll try. My name's Tom Healy, and I've been in the learning and development and training space for almost 2 decades now as an entrepreneur, and have put over 1 million learners, whether those are college students or affiliated with a nonprofit or inside a company, through different online learning programs. So a lot of experience with training people on how to do things at a high level. And Trainual is a platform that close to 10,000 small businesses and medium and large size businesses trust to transfer knowledge to their team. So very excited to talk about the concept of a playbook and this intersection between the work Trainual and Benchmark does, where ultimately I think it makes organizations better and worth more and more attractive to someone that's thinking about purchasing them.
Perfect. All right, so we'll dive right in, starting with you, Tom, and then Clinton, I want to hear your definition. Tom, what do you define as a business playbook, and what should ideally be in it?
You know, I view a playbook as being the hub of everything. And it's a great starting point, a great knowledge center where all of the information it takes to run a business is accessible. And it really serves as that intranet or that hub or that centralized knowledge base for an organization. Now, what goes in there? The short answer is everything, but realistically, we're talking about processes. We're talking about policies, roles, responsibilities, training, how to do things, making sure that everyone on your team knows exactly what to do, how to do it, and then ultimately who's responsible for it. And really what we're trying to do here is avoid an owner or a manager or someone that's just been there for a long time holding all of that information captive. And, oh, well, everyone knows to just knock on Bob's door if we can't figure something out or we have a question, or the proverbial business owner that founded the company 1 million years ago, and all the information is in their head. And we want to get all of that out into that knowledge center so that things get done without the knocking on the door. And we want them to get done right. We want new people to get onboarded quickly. We want to be able to delegate information and responsibilities with confidence. We want the business to scale without individual people being the bottleneck. So ultimately, providing a platform that documents how the business runs so it's not dependent on specific people inside the organization that probably aren't going to be there forever.
Perfect. And then Clinton, what's your definition of a business playbook? Or is there anything you want to add that Tom didn't mention that might be especially relevant to, a potential buyer?
Yeah. So we work on the sell side, but in order to be successful, we have to get into the mind of the buyers. So I'll describe how we see it because that's how we think buyers see it. And they see it as one of the leading risk minimization tools that a company can have. And they're looking for the highest return over the lowest amount of risk. So it can be a real value driver because three of the largest concerns that buyers have when they're buying a company can all be addressed by a good, high quality manual. And so a playbook. And so the first one is, the owners are transitioning. They're either leaving completely, leaving partially, leaving after a period of time, and the intellectual property that's in their head is going to go with them unless, so that's the first risk. The second risk is, particularly when you're dealing with the owner-operated business and you might be private equity coming in to buy, they're very worried that the second level management is not going to like working for a more, professionalized, as they call themselves, owner, and they might walk. So then you have that level of intellectual property that leaves as well. That's the second risk. And the third risk, and you touched on this already, is they want to know they're buying the business and they're paying a good high price because they want to grow, or as you said, even scale the business. And so they're always concerned that even if everyone stays, the business isn't scalable. And when you have things processed out in a playbook, that can be a really nice laying down the breadcrumbs for the buyer to see, this is a scalable. So I see it as a tool to attack those three major risks that buyers are always looking for early on in the process.
Really appreciate that clarity and loved everyone's points here. I think moving along, Clinton, do you have any anecdotes that come to mind where a deal was looking good, the numbers were looking good, everyone seemed excited, and then actually a deal was soured because that client or business or what have you didn't have a playbook or operating manual of some kind?
Yeah, I wish I had more stories where the playbook was in place and it made everything goes nicely, but you don't get a good story out of those, right? It just happens and things go as planned. So you're hitting on the right thing. It's the absence of the playbook that is interesting. And I tell you one, we were selling a pallet broker and great buyer. And, you sign a letter of intent. It takes about 3 months to close while the buyer is doing the due diligence. And early on, I think before they even sign the letter of intent, they asked the client, what percentage of your pallets are recycled versus new? And it seemed like a throwaway question. It was one of 100 questions they asked. They didn't follow up on it. The client estimated about a 70-30 split. They got into due diligence. They got copies of the thousands of invoices from every year. And they recalculated that number. And they said, we think it's 90-10. Why? How did that happen? How did our client get it so wrong? Well, he was just asked to give an estimate. He gave an off-the-cuff answer. We see this so often. An off-the-cuff answer is not necessarily right. It's not someone trying to be fraudulent. He didn't know that 70-30 was better than 90-10. He just gave his honest opinion. They weren't tracking the data. They didn't have that process in place. But more importantly, when you sell pallets, you put about 330 of them on a truck. And so some of his salespeople would log that one truckload as 330. Some of them would log it as one because they didn't have a process. And their financial system worked. They weren't losing money, but they just didn't have the process down for how to write the invoices. So when we went and verified the client's information, we were not aware of this split. And so we waited. If we said one, that was one. If we said 330, that was 330 times more important. And so when we went to verify as 70-30, it looked pretty close. The buyer picked up on this inconsistency in the process and walked 2.5 months after signing a letter of intent. 2 weeks away from closing the deal, they walked over that issue. So that's a good one because it seems like such a simple thing, but it was a simple thing to fix. But once it was too late, it was too late. It was no longer simple.
That's a great anecdote. I would have never been able to guess that story. So, so I look forward to hearing more of those stories at some point. So thank you for sharing that. And then Clinton, just like a small follow-up, I guess, just in general, what are the most critical roles or workflows or KPIs that a seller should document to prove operational clarity to a buyer? Are there a few, like, hey, critical things you can't forget about that might apply to just all kinds of buyers, not necessarily, industry specific?
Yeah, so I think in terms of our piece of a business's life cycle, which is getting ready for it to sell and getting the best deal possible, I think you really got to look at that maybe a little bit differently than you're thinking. And the buyers will say, the most valuable asset of this business walks out the door every day. And so I think you have to look at where, as the business owner, where's the highest risk. Okay, so if it's a process that I, as a business owner, have in my head, and I'm going to be able to tell a very convincing story that I'm not leaving and I'm here for the long haul and I'm doing this deal because I want to grow the business faster, I don't want to retire, those could be a little bit de-emphasized. But what we oftentimes see clients missing is that, George, who's the lead adjuster in a construction company, estimator, in a construction company, George he hasn't drunk the Kool-Aid and he might not be around forever. And they miss out on that and they focus too much on, all right, what's in my head? Because I'm thinking about, my future, and they don't go down far enough into the business. They don't identify those single points of vulnerability. And it's surprising. You can have a company making, $20 million of EBITDA a year, and I can go to that business and pick out 4 or 5 people that are single points of failure that can bring down that business. And so I think that's the place to start. Not what's in the owner's head, but what's in the third parties or the employees' heads. That's the place to start if you're looking at doing this for our process. And then you get to the part that is in the owner's head. Now, if you're an owner who says, I want to sell and be out after a 6-month transition period, flip that around. What's in the owner's head has got to be down first. And then, you also, I think, can get some words from the expert here on building playbooks. But I think if you just get it done and then, you look to sell the business, it probably needs a little, wear and tear on it, a little bit of like testing, proof of concept, And so if you're scrambling around at the last minute to do that, you're not going to get probably the full value out of it.
Yeah. I'm going to pass it to Tom in a second, but Clinton, I just like, what really stood out about what you said was along the lines of, it's less about, document processes and more so along the lines of how do we eliminate these points of failure? So I thought that was a really interesting reframe. So I appreciate that, that insight. And so Tom, what would you say is the secret sauce to building the ultimate business playbook and training? And also what are some of the biggest mistakes that businesses make in doing so?
Well, how much time do we have? there's a lot. I mean, there's, and especially as a company is larger and there's more moving pieces and there's more people and departments and a more complex industry. I mean, there's a lot to this, but the importance of getting it right outweighs the challenges of doing it in the first place. So couple things, first of all is we want something that's simple and clear, not something that's complex. So often I'll see an organization that says, okay, we need to document this stuff. We need a centralized point of contact for all of our information. So just using Clinton's example of the estimator. Well, the estimator that's been there forever sits down and creates some things. Well, that estimator is pulling from thousands of repetitions and decades of experience, and what they create could be something that's complex or industry jargon or impossible for someone to follow. So when I look at any training initially, or I look at how we're documenting what someone does in the business, I should understand how to do it. I should be able to walk in. Now, there's certain things maybe in medicine or engineering that are highly complicated, but the vast majority of things that we're documenting, someone like myself with the naked eye should be able to come in and go, okay, I get how to do this. And with enough practice based on what you put in front of me, I'd be able to do it. So that's an important one. It's just something that's simple and people can understand. also making sure that everything in the business, everything we're teaching has ownership and accountability tied to it. So who's ultimately responsible for this? How do we hold that person accountable for doing that? And it's answering the simple question of who does what. So everything needs to be tied to a specific person or role or department that is ultimately responsible for doing that. Now, another issue that companies run into is they create this stuff and they stash it off on a Dropbox or a Google Drive, or they put it on a binder on the shelf, and it's not searchable or accessible in any way. Therefore, it's just collecting dust. So making sure that whatever we create, I call it usable or functional. How does someone that is having trouble understanding what to do next, or can't remember something they were taught during onboarding when they were drinking out of a fire hose, where do they go to reference the material? How do they search something, find it? So it needs to be a living, searchable resource, not something that's static and collecting dust. Also making sure that the best playbooks, it's not just about documenting things, but it's about connecting how to actually do those things. So when I explain that you need to do this, 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 and this, I also need to provide training on how to do those things. So just telling someone or documenting it's not enough. It needs to have training. Well, how do we train people? It could be through videos. It could be through checklists. It could be through a process map, and also hitting on different learning styles. But I need to not just tell you to do something, but I need to show you how to do it. And then the last piece, and this is a tricky one, but making sure that the culture of the organization is really well woven in to a playbook. And how often do you hear, oh, well, the culture's eroding because we all went virtual, or the culture's eroding because a new owner or new CEO is now in charge? We need to make sure that we're not just telling people how to do things, but we're explaining why we do things the way we do. The reason that we do this really long process isn't because it's the easiest thing to do. It's because it's what's best for the customer. And when the customer feels the love from our organization, they buy more things and they tell their friends to come into our restaurant or buy from our company. And so explaining the why behind all this stuff gives it so much more meaning. Now, the other thing you asked me about was mistakes, and a lot of mistakes happen. The most obvious one is this stuff just doesn't get built, meaning an organization wants to be sold, they want to be acquired, and there is no playbook at all. There is no place where all of this stuff exists. The next one is it's just way too complex. It's way too cumbersome. A buyer wants to be able to open up a playbook, go in a portal, and go, okay, I understand this. It's well organized. It's easy to navigate. I see where everything is. And Clint and I have talked about this offline before, but when information isn't easily accessible, or it's hard to find, or we're not really sure if or where it exists, it puts all these doubts into a potential buyer's mind. And then they go, well, what else is missing? What else is being hidden? What else is not documented? So it opens up this whole, when these things aren't easy to navigate. I'll tell you too that a lot of the training and playbooks I initially look at, it's just boring. And well, what does boring mean? Well, boring means that people aren't going to pay attention. And if they don't pay attention, they don't learn. And if they don't learn, then they don't do the things you want them to do. So you can absolutely bore people to death to the point where they just don't retain the information and put it into practice. And then the last thing is we build something like this, but then we don't put it into action. And so I love when playbooks have a big launch, meaning this is now our knowledge center. This is now where everything lives, and everyone's going to use it. And if you come into my office with a question, I'm not going to answer it. I'm going to tell you to refer to our playbook because the answer is in there. And I'm going to start to put a lot of pressure on the playbook. And I'm going to train people that they go there versus waiting around for the answer or making up a process or going and knocking on someone's door. So hope that answered your question. I know there's a lot there, but I get excited talking about this stuff.
I love it. That was definitely the secret sauce and all the points. So thank you so much for that. It was really insightful. And then back to Clinton, like I was curious, how does a business playbook, as we described, lead to multiple offers and better deal terms? And how significantly can it expand a buyer pool?
Sure. Yeah, that's another thing I could talk about all day, but I'll keep it short. So just, in selling a business, you got to kind of think of it as a fishing net, right? And you're the fish are the buyers, right? So you want to have the biggest opening in the net to catch as many fish in there, right? That's creating the big buyer pool and getting them in. And you got to find a way to work them through the net and get them to actually go through the process. And then at the end of the net, you got to close the deal or else it's all worth nothing, right? So those 3 steps, getting them in, getting them through the process and closing the net. And as Tom kind of alluded to, when they start off, they're almost like saying, we do this the easy way or the hard way. And so if you start off with a call with the broker when they first speak to the seller and they get some wishy-washy answers and the answers don't kind of tie out, or the answers don't match what's in the financial statements, or what the one owner says versus what another owner says about how they do things don't line up, you've just created a process that's way harder. So the best thing we can do when we just start even with a teaser before we've even identified the name of a company, if we can put something in that 1-page teaser to talk about how processed out the business is, that greatly expands the pool, because different buyers have different risk appetites, and some just won't get involved in a business that's not processed out. So you can't even get them into the funnel. So that's the first step where it really helps out. The next step, getting them through the funnel, is big, because this is where they're going to start to hear different answers, or a piece of data doesn't match another piece of data that they get. And if you have the playbook, everyone's singing from the same hymn. The data is going to match what's in the playbook, because you might have 3 offices, and each office might be doing a process differently because the company doesn't have the playbook. And the first answer they got was how the owner thought it was being done, but 2 of the offices actually do it differently. And that just keeps them from moving through the process, either drop out or they start doing it the hard way, where every single thing has to be verified. What would have been 3 questions is now 10 questions on everything across the board. You start to lose that goodwill that you need to keep the deal moving at the right pace. And then in terms of closing the deal, you end up having to negotiate a much more difficult contract if the buyer doesn't have confidence that everything is as the seller told them it was, or everything that the playbook says is how the company works. So there's no playbook, and this owner said that, and this owner said that, and the broker said that, and the financial statements appear to say this other thing. I don't know what's what. I got to have an extra 5 pages in the purchase agreement to protect myself as the buyer. That makes it really hard to close deals. Then you end up with the deal terms. I need a bigger escrow, less cash at close, because I'm not sure that the company really is what I've been told it is. You end up with less cash at close and more earnouts. Well, you're going to have to prove to me that this business is scalable, because I didn't see lots of hints of that. I didn't see a playbook. You're telling me stuff, but if you could have shown me instead of told me, we could have gotten more of that cash up front and made it less contingent. So in terms of the legal terms, in terms of the diligence, in terms of the actual structure of the final offer that the deal closes on, are all ways you either don't get people through the funnel, or you lose them out of the funnel, or you end up with the worst deal. And I could go on with stories of each and every one of those 3 steps of where we've lost buyers or lost deals or had to settle on something that we could have done better on if we had had well-documented processes in the company.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing all that. And then because, obviously, Clinton, that's your perspective with the sell side advisory. And Tom, obviously, you're in the weeds with the business owners, very operationally. And so, I'm sure those business owners have no awareness of all this, lay out the net and move them down the funnel and all this, the secret, the things behind the scenes that Benchmark does. And so I'm curious, just why should a small business owner engage with a firm like Benchmark rather than trying to figure out this selling process on their own?
Sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
I think that was Jared. That was for me, right?
I'm sorry. That was for Tom. And then by all means, Clinton, tell us if you agree or add anything else to it.
All right, I wanted to make sure I wasn't answering.
Sorry, that's my mistake. I should have said to Tom.
No, you're fine. So, I think there's two things I look at. Number one is benchmark is going to get you the maximum value possible for your business. So there is an upside to someone negotiating on your behalf, driving up a bidding war, finding a strategic buyer, et cetera, et cetera. And I just believe that they will more than make up whatever fees they charge by maximizing that value. And that's the fun part. The other side of this, though, is the risk mitigation. And I think that's the hard part. If I have a successful business, I can go out and say, hey, I'm up for sale and make me your best offer. And I can go to my competitors or strategic buyers or vendors or whoever. Okay. And maybe I can negotiate a great number, a great multiple, a great price. But there's also this other side of risk mitigation, which is, what don't I know? How could I get screwed over here? How could I not get my full payment? How could I, not protect myself? How could I open myself up to liability or vulnerability? And I know that there's a lot more than that, but those are the two major buckets. And then there's so many nuances there. I mean, that I see of, are you getting the best deal? Is this how long you want to stay in the business for? Non-competes and how you're paid out. There's all these things. And, just because you were very successful at residential roofing or construction or plumbing or whatever your business was, doesn't mean that you're possibly going to know all of these little nuances. So trust the people that have seen thousands of deals, that have seen all the things that can go wrong here, and can connect you with the right resources, the appropriate people for all these different things. And I will tell you that in my experience, there are certain people, certain business owners that are very protective of paying out fees of any type to anyone. But man, there's 1,000 different ways that a business owner that tries to go about this themselves can screw things up. So I've advised a lot of people over the years of, find a firm like Benchmark that can just do all this for you. You're going to sell your business for more. You're going to sell it quicker. You're going to have more potential buyers. You're going to protect yourself. You're going to save yourself so much time and effort. And, Clinton could talk about this all day as well, but find professionals that can do all these things, not your nephew that is kind of an attorney and delves into divorces and bankruptcy, and he can also help you sell your business.
And then, so thank you for that, Tom. And Clinton, I welcome any additional quick points you have on that. And then my follow-up to you, Clinton, as well is, obviously, like, this is, a broader, this is a longer-term conversation. Like, valuations and playbooks, like, these are long-term, obviously, conversations that aren't in the immediate day-to-day operations of a business. So, just kind of along that same vein is, like, when should a business owner start to get ready to engage you? I figure this is years in advance. So, or any telltale signs. So would love to hear any clarification or add-on points to what Tom said, and then just hey, when should owners start thinking about this and talk to you?
Yeah, let me add on 2 points, because they come right at the front of the process. And one of them is anonymity, right? So our clients tell us, not in so many words, sell my business, but don't tell anyone I'm for sale, right? That's okay. That's how we do it. We have a process that does that. At some point, a limited number of people need to know, but to get out there and run the broader process, you can do that on an anonymous basis. You can't do that yourself. You have to have someone to be the front, to get the non-disclosure agreement signed, to get the anonymous teaser out there. So you have to have a broker, if for no other reason than to get that process started. And then the second thing I'll say is, because it ties into what we've discussed a bit, we always tell our clients when they're working with us, hey, the most important thing you can do while you're working with us is keep hitting your numbers. And so the amount of labor and amount of time, frankly, some of it's just wasted, that that we can come in and waste for the client, and the labor that we can do for the client allows them to keep running their business. I don't know how someone could go through even a modest process without having a bunch of outsourced labor. Forget about the intellectual side of it, just the outsourced labor to get the stuff done without taking the eyes off the ball on the business. And that, again, that comes from dealing with owner-operated businesses. But then to answer your, what was your second question again? Sorry.
No worries. It was along the lines of when should a prospective client like what are kind of dummy-proof signs, and how much time in advance should they start to talk to you? Because obviously this is a long process.
So one thing is, you can't time the market. If most businesses, if they're lucky, they get to do this one time. It's, when you're buying publicly traded stocks and you time the market and you blow this one, well, you get it right the next time. But you're selling your business, you kind of putting all your eggs in one or two baskets, depending on how the transaction unfolds. So timing the market is a very difficult thing to do. And some owners try to time it of when they think they've reached their peak EBITDA, or when they think the macroeconomic conditions are correct, or when they have heard there's a lot of buyers that are going into the market. And at the end of the day, having done this now for 30 years almost, that is not really what determines the valuation of a business. It comes down to more core aspects of the business. There's other things nibble around the edges of the degree of interest and the valuation metrics. So the result of that is every business should always be ready to sell. You don't know when whatever stars you're waiting to align may fall into place, but they're not going to stay there for a long time. And selling the business and doing it properly usually takes a year, right? So if everything is lined up for you now, is it still going to be lined up a year from now? Probably not. Something's going to happen. There's going to be a plague or supply chain or inflation or interest rates or a change in administration, right? Nothing stays aligned for that long. You never know when, you might have a medical issue and your idea of the future just got accelerated. You never know when that one estimator you have leaves and you can't find a good replacement. You never know when someone who really wants to buy your business and is willing to pay a good price is going to pick you up and call you. So if you're sitting around thinking, oh, there's these things I want to do to sell and I can put them off because I'm not going to really do this for 3 years. If there are things you should do to sell, you should do them now. And the longer they're in place, the more dividends they'll pay out to you along the way, because you're not going to do anything to make your business more sellable that's not good for your business, right? So why not do the good things now? In other words, why not get ready to sell now? So, you start from the premise that you should always be ready to sell, and then understand that when you make the commitment to go through the process, it's probably going to take a year. The next most important thing is, where the owners are in their life cycle. We had a client that the first time I went to market, they said, the owner said, I could never work for anybody. I've worked for myself for 35 years. And I'm going to be out in 6 months after this deal closes. Tell all the buyers that. No process manual, no strong second level of management, and we're like, sir, please, we're not going to be dishonest, but you need to rethink this, He's like, well, that's the way it is. But over the course of it took us a long time. So we marketed that for about 9 months, and buyer after buyer said, I'm not buying the business. He's leaving in 3 months. I'm not interested. We could get no interest, but he did get far enough along to meet the buyers, and he realized, you know what, I'm fairly advanced in age, but I could learn a few new things. I kind of like the approach that I'm hearing from these buyers. I might like to have another chapter in my life that I wasn't planning on. Stick around for 3 to 5 years and learn from them and see what happens and get a second bite at the apple. He's like, change it up. I'm all in. And so we went back to the buyers and said, hey, you passed, because he said he was going to leave. But now he met buyers, he's got a new outlook on life, and they all said, yeah, no, you already said 3 months, sorry. The horse had left the barn. It's like the Seinfeld, they returned it for spite. You can't change your mind.
Exactly.
So you've got to think about the owner's time horizon, because maximum value will be, going through the process for a year and having another 3 to 5 years that you're honestly interested in sticking around, right? So if you think I'm going to retire when I'm 65, you should be on the market when you're 60, 61 years old at the latest. And, there's no, the process can be run very confidentially. The people in the business don't need to know. The suppliers don't need to know. The customers don't need to know. A limited pool of qualified buyers are the only people that need to learn that there was a thought about going to market or selling the business. So if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But one of the things that people always say from working with us is, I learned so much about my business. Right? So even if they ultimately decide not to sell, they're better business people. They have a better company, and they go out and get that playbook done at that point if they don't have it already, because they certainly have learned the importance of it by going through the process.
Very interesting. And so I guess just to recap in the easiest way to think about it, should someone engage you maybe 4 to 5 years in advance from when they actually want to fully exit, like fully leave the business?
Yeah. So yeah. That's yes, because again, you may go to a broker, you may come to us, and we may have just had a client, and we had this with a nice natural gas distributor where we had 5 offers that were essentially identical, and the client got to pick the one they liked the best. Honestly, that's how they made the decision. So there were 4 people that got second place. And they just kept calling us and saying, "Hey, what do you have? What do you have? What do you have? We got to get into this industry." And, we're able to go pick up another client and run right through that process. That client was not thinking about selling at that point in time, and said, "Oh, well, you've got these 4 buyers that all are upset they got second place, and they know what they need to bid. And we had a very good idea what the company would be worth because we just ran that robust process." And so that was someone who came to market, way sooner than they had thought. But if you're talking to a broker, you want to see, some brokers don't take that approach. They want to say, "No, hey, no, I'm going to charge you a monthly fee." And, so because, we should have you sold in 6 months. So there are some brokers that take that approach. We don't charge monthly. Our success comes when the business sells, or else we don't have success, because that's what we're hired to do. And so we've set up our relationships and our engagements, and our default provision is a 5-year contract. If somebody wants a longer contract, we'll give them a longer contract. It does not usually take 5 years, but that's the commitment that we make. That's the kind of commitment that a broker should make, because you want to be ready to sell even before you're thinking you're ready you need to be ready to sell. And because if you try to compact it all down and try to run the process in 6 months, it's going to be hard to keep your eye on the ball and keep hitting your numbers. Right? Nobody comes to us and says, "I'm really bored at work. I don't have enough to do. Let's talk about selling my business so I have something to do every afternoon." It's almost always the opposite. I'm overwhelmed. I need reinforcements. I need to step back a little bit. I need to spend some more time with family. And so the longer you can stretch that time horizon out, the more you can accomplish that goal.
Perfect. Love it. Okay, so 5 years, easy number for people to remember. When they want to exit within around 5 years. And then Tom, I have a follow-up question for you. Clinton had kind of painted a picture around, people scrambling to get their playbooks together, right? So how can a business owner, that wasn't preparing super far in advance, and they're coming across an opportunity to maybe sell or exit, or they need to sell, sooner rather than they expected. How can they remediate getting everything together so that's not a scramble? How can they more efficiently scramble during this diligence kind of process? What are some common things they can do?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly want to avoid scrambling, because this stuff isn't easy to do, especially for a business that's more complex. And there is always going to be a fear amongst buyers, at least in my experience, where does everything walk out the door when Mary leaves, or her 6 months or year is up, or she gets hit by a bus, or whatever happens. And it's not just, I think sometimes people think this is only in small businesses. Oh, so this is just really tiny businesses. Well, there's a lot of people that feared Apple would lose, its core, its way of doing things, its DNA and blueprint when Steve Jobs passed away. So this is true of all organizations. And how do we minimize, what I'll call founder dependency? And that's where you want to go through this stuff. And no, Jared, you don't want to scramble. One of the big things here is, I'll call it making the invisible visible. And what I mean by that is a buyer wants something tangible. So they don't want to hear, oh, it's all tribal knowledge, or it's all in people's head. They want to know, what are the processes? What are the vendor relationships? What's the culture of the organization? Where is this? How do I access it? I want to see it. I want to touch it. I don't want it to walk out of the door in 6 months. And so making that tangible is so important. And, making sure, another big thing is protecting the customer experience, because we want to make sure that customers will continue to get the same experience that they were previously getting. So what's our continuity plan to make sure that, hey, we're not just winging it, but the way we do things, the way we treat customers, our sales process, our servicing process, that's all documented. It's written out in a very clear way, and that's not going to fade away. That's not going to suffer. Also making sure that, we've put things in place, and Clinton mentioned this earlier, around scalability. So I want to be able to look at things and say, okay, if we're able to double sales because of some marketing or because of strategic relationships that we already have, the infrastructure that's in place can handle that. Meaning we could dump 2, 3, 4, 10 times as many sales into this apparatus, and they're able to handle it. But we're going to have to add people. We're going to have to add resources. So if the infrastructure is not there, then what are we really buying? Why couldn't we just go and do this ourselves? And the last thing is just conveying that, I'll call it professionalism, and showing that, hey, we might not be the largest player in this space in our market or across the country, but we are an incredibly well-oiled machine. And to Clinton's point, if people walk in and say, hey, I know you weren't ready to sell your business, but I'd like to kick the tires on it, is there a well-run operation in place? Because I don't know in what world you'd say, hey, we're not selling right now, so we don't need to be a well-oiled machine. Or we're not selling right now, so it's okay if we just continue to wing it. Clinton made such a great point, and I've been saying this for many years too, is, it's the adage of prepare your business to sell whether you're going to sell or not, because those exact same activities will make the business better. So if my goal is to grow my company as much as possible over the next 5 years, then all roads lead to what we're talking about today. And if I want to sell it in 6 months, all roads lead to what we're talking today. So your timeline's almost irrelevant. If you want to grow the business and sell it, regardless of timeline, do this stuff yesterday so that the company performs better.
So 2 quick follow-up questions to that then, Tom, is what do you say to business owners who feel it's too overwhelming and or too uninteresting or not glamorous to finally start documenting things so that they don't have to scramble? And the second part of that question is, what are some quick wins or starting points in Trainual software that might make documenting feel easier or less daunting or things like that?
Well, your first question in terms of, hey, this is too daunting, or I don't have enough time, or it's not my core competency. Yeah, it's not interesting. No one on my team can do it. We're all stretched too thin around here. Hire someone to do it for you. And, in my role with Trainual, I oversee our certified partners. We have 105 certified experts that know the software, and this is what they do. They go into businesses and they build it for companies, and they do it in 60 to 90 days, and it's amazing, and it's done, and everything is out of the owner's head into a playbook. So that there's a very easy button that exists to be able to handle that. Now, in terms of where to start, I love starting with the org chart. And what I mean by that is, who is everyone inside this organization? What do they do? how do we break them into different departments? For each of them, what are their specific roles and responsibilities? How do we measure their performance? When we put someone new into that role in the org chart, what is everything that she's going to learn in what order so that she's up to speed and able to hit the ground running in a reasonable amount of time? So Jared, I love putting a ton of pressure on the org chart. And just by starting with that and doing those activities that I shared, that can provide tremendous value, because now a potential buyer says, okay, I understand how the organization's structured. I understand who does what. I understand how money flows throughout the organization. I understand, hey, where we can add people and expand that. I understand how we hold people accountable. I understand how the culture of the organization, the core values that are written in the wall over there, actually show up in the work people are doing and what performance metrics we measure. So it's a fascinating exercise to go through that, but just by nailing that piece of things, that in and of itself is of tremendous value when you're trying to be as appealing as possible to someone that's considering taking over and running your business.
Perfect. And then back to Clinton, from a buyer psychology standpoint, how do strong systems and documentation change the way that buyers approach valuation and negotiation?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of touched on this earlier, so I can give a kind of a shorthand answer here.
Right. I did hear that, and I do remember it. If you could expand on it a little further, because I thought it was really interesting, and even any exact specifics or whatever, any anecdotes. I've liked your anecdote so far.
Okay. Yeah. So the first thing is, some people are going to turn away. They're not going to like the risk profile of the company, so they're going to turn away. They're not going to get into that funnel. And then the second thing is, diligence. Every client says that due diligence in a process, even when we're leading it for them, is one of the most painful things they had to do in their business. And I can't overemphasize how much you can streamline the due diligence process by having a central document in the business that everything refers back to. It's one of the reasons I like Trainual's program so much, because it's not just a SOP. It's not just how do we deliver the customer service experience. It's so much more. And the way, at a time when reading your book, I mean, I saw in the book is, that is the kind of, you think of like the tree without the leaves on it, that builds a solid M&A experience for a company. If they have all that stuff, the way that you guys lay it out, it's ideal. And, I would add that if they don't have it and someone's working with us, we don't go into a company and go talk to the rank and file people. Hi, we're here representing the owner who's thinking about selling the business. Talk to us. Nope. Nobody knows except the owner, maybe their CFO they bring in. And the owners don't know where all the documents are. They don't know what all the processes are. They've grown the business a lot and it's kind of grown up underneath them. But your people can go in and ask all those questions from the people that have the actual answers. If someone were building the manual or the playbook at the same time as they're working with us, synergies would be tremendous, because there's a lot of access to a lot of information our clients try to get without tipping anyone off, but they're afraid if they ask too many questions, then people are going to wonder why. But you're going in to collect it for your purposes, and the information has such an overlap with the information that the buyers are going to want early in the process. And so we want to have it early in the process. We don't want any surprises when we go to market. If we can get in there and look at that ahead of time, whether they've created the playbook previously or they're creating it in conjunction with engaging us, it helps so much. And I think that's probably the where I can best add to my earlier answer, which is it helps us build a better process for the client, because the last thing it's a big thing we talk about, no surprises. We don't want a buyer come in telling us that they found some defect. We want to know about a defect in the company beforehand. So, You got to disclose it, but you want to sequence it. You want to emphasize it. You want to make sure it's not seen irrationally. And when the other side finds something as opposed to being told about something, it's a totally different experience. And so when we have a client that has a good playbook, it is a great place for us to start our engagement with the client. And that's probably something that I left out in the earlier answer. We really just appreciate it. And everybody on the team gets a big lift out of knowing, all right, we've got a client here that's processed out. That takes 1,000 questions off the table, takes 100 issues off the table, and it helps us really get going fast.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I know we're coming up on time before the Q&A portion of this, but I think really what I hear between all of these answers between both of you is around kind of like a playbook it shows integrity. Like forget yes, organization, all those things, of course, but it communicates integrity. And, we're getting exactly what we plan to get. And if any inconsistencies, like Clinton mentioned with the pallet anecdote, yeah, what else are they hiding? What else are they, whether intentionally or unintentionally? So that's just kind of the word that comes to mind is kind of integrity and transparency. And so just wrapping up here, really question for the both of you is for a business owner thinking of selling in the next couple of years, ideally 5 years, because Clinton said that's the optimal kind of timeline to start preparing. What would you say is the single most important step they should take today to get exit ready?
Who do you want to go first on that?
Yeah.
I'll go first.
I don't know. Go ahead, Clinton, go first.
Yeah, I'd say data collection, right? And that data collection is key. Data drives these transactions. Owner operators, if they were pilots, they would be flying by sight. Buyers, if they were pilots, fly by instrument. So our clients feel that they don't need the data. They don't need to process everything out. And part of the process is telling people what data to collect and how to collect it, as to go back to my anecdote on the pallets, right? And the sellers, they walk the floor. They see the trucks leave the loading bay. They maybe are the head salesman for the company. They review the books every week. They hit the payroll. They know what's going on in their business. They're experts in their business. So they have this huge blind spot for professionalizing, institutionalizing, processing out the business, because what they've been doing works for them. And it probably would continue to work for them for many, many years. It might not work for them optimally for many, many years, but as soon as they come across the buyer that is going to be data driven, it's like hitting a stone wall at a high speed. And so data collection. And so I would think, when you're putting together your playbook, a lot of the processes, you have to standardize what data gets collected, how it gets collected. I think that's a key part of the process. And Benchmark's not a big advocate of saying, you want to sell your house, redo the kitchen, redo the bathroom. If you go in and, you have a ugly pink bathroom from the 70s and you repaint it lime green, the ideal buyer shows up and says, well, I need a discount because I wanted a pink bathroom and now it's green. You've just wasted the money on the paint and detracted from the value of your company. Or you say, well, I'm a bigger company. I should put in a new accounting software system now. Well, you might move from QuickBooks to Sage, but then the ideal buyer comes along and they want an industry-specific software. So if you've ever gone through a software integration, especially on an accounting system, you know what I'm talking about. You just self-inflicted wound of the worst kind, and you've laid out a bunch of money for which you're getting no return. So we're not big on saying get in there and fix everything. We're big on focus on a few things. Processing out your business, getting your data, those are the two biggest things, and they're hand in glove.
Perfect. And then Tom, what's this to bring us home? What do you think is the single most important to get exit ready here?
I'm probably going to give you a very similar answer, just worded differently, but I would just say invest in organization, because perception's reality. And when I walk into a home that's disheveled and they're hoarders and there's stuff everywhere, I make certain judgments about that family, that homeowner, and what's going on. doesn't mean that those judgments are right, but it's the same for the potential buyer. So when there's paperwork everywhere and I got to find that and I got to get back to you about this and it's in this person's head and, oh, Mary knows all that stuff. And the perception to me is you have no idea what you're doing. You're just winging it. And the minute you walk out the door, this entire thing collapses. So investing in organization, because it's the right thing for the business and it'll drive value, but also because the potential buyer will perceive organization and professionalism and that it is a well-oiled operation. So I want my business to look as pretty and beautiful and clean and organized as possible so that I'm attractive to those potential buyers.
Perfect. All right. We are out of time and then it's heading to the Q&A. But thank you both so much for joining us here on this webinar. Hopefully everyone found it valuable, and hopefully it's very clear to, business owners. Don't try to take your business to market on your own. Just hire the pros, like do yourself a favor. And then, hey, when you want to start getting exit ready, you should always be exit ready. And if it feels daunting or boring or whatever to document all your stuff, or it's something you've wanted to do for years, you never have. And hey, what if so-and-so best employee walks out the door? Your business that has been humming along might not operate so well. So just get it done, hire a professional from Trainual, one of these certified partners, put it in our software, and everyone's better off. And this all ultimately will get you your higher valuation and quicker exit for less buyer risk. So thank you both for joining. Really appreciate it. Love this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.